$2 says she won't even step down. 5 says she takes one look at Rourke's face and begs the driver to take her back to Omaha.
Which man is Elias Rourke?
You'll recognize him. The fire marked what was left of him for you. Miss Bellamy.
Mr. Rourke.
Your return ticket is still yours. You don't have to step down. You hear that? Even the monster knows you'll regret it.
No, Mr. Danner. What frightens me isn't his face. What frightens me is a town that can watch a man burn alive and remember nothing but the scars.
You should ask him what he's been hiding beneath the roof of that forge. But you already know. Careful, Rourke. I'm always careful.
I haven't promised to marry you today,
I know.
but I have chosen the man I intend to stand beside.
Mara Bellamy stepped down because Elias was the first man who offered her a way home, before asking her to stay. But that night, inside the house behind the forge, she would discover a key that belonged only to her, a box filled with unpaid invoices, and Elias's signature on jobs he had never performed. The fire had destroyed the blacksmith's face, but it had not burned away the truth. And when Mara began tracing the red seal of Vale freight, someone in Ember Ridge would decide that the forge needed to burn a second time, before she discovered who the real monster was. So, how did a mail-order bride uncover the secret that could burn Ember Ridge to the ground? Let's begin. And before we do, like this video and subscribe so you never miss another frontier story. By noon, half of Ember Ridge had found a reason to stand within sight of Elias Rourke's forge. Men who had not sharpened a plow in years carried dull blades under their arms. Women lingered outside Abigail Crane's post office with letters they had already mailed. 3 boys sat on the hitching rail across the road, sharing a sack of apples and watching the eastern trail as though judgment itself might come rolling over the ridge. Wade Danner had turned the waiting into sport. $2 says she never leaves the coach, he called from the porch of the Coyote House. Another 2 says she takes one look at Rourke and asks the driver to keep moving. A few men laughed. Others glanced toward the forge and lowered their voices. Elias heard them anyway. His right ear had carried little more than a dull hum since the fire, but the left one had learned to catch what people believed they were saying softly. He stood beneath the open awning with a mare's hoof braced between his knees, drawing a rasp across the iron shoe in long, even strokes. The forge behind him breathed orange light. Heat pressed against the scarred side of his neck and drew sweat beneath his collar. He kept his hat low, though the autumn sun did not trouble his eyes. Cinder, his gray-muzzled hound, lay beside the anvil with his chin on his paws. "You hear all that?" Elias murmured. The dog opened one eye. "Best judgment in town," Elias said, and returned to the hoof. 4 years earlier, people in Ember Ridge had called him brave. That had lasted until the bandages came off. In the spring of 1877, a rail repair shed near Blackwater Gorge caught fire after a crate of blasting powder was stored too close to a stove. Elias had been shoeing a freight team when the first wall went up. 2 laborers were still inside, pinned beneath a fallen rack of tools. He went back for them. The first man came out over Elias's shoulder. The second crawled beneath Elias's arm, while burning pitch fell from the roof. A blast threw all 3 through the doorway. Both laborers lived. The flames took the skin from Elias's right temple to the hinge of his jaw, then traveled beneath his shirt across his neck and shoulder. One ear never recovered. The corner of his mouth pulled tight when he spoke. In cold weather, his right hand stiffened until he could barely close it. The railroad paid the doctor and nothing more. Calvin Vale, whose freight company had supplied the repair shed, praised Elias in front of the town council, called him the finest man in the territory, and then offered him steady work at half the proper rate. Elias accepted. A man with a ruined face did not ask for better terms, when even children stared at him from behind their mother's skirts. By 36, he owned the forge, the narrow cabin behind it, 2 workhorses, and little else. He repaired wagon axles, shaped bridge straps, shod cavalry mounts, and kept the Blackwater crossing passable whenever spring runoff loosened the timbers. He worked until his hands ached and ate most suppers from the same blackened pot. At night, when the last coal dimmed, silence settled over the cabin with more weight than any hammer he had lifted. Cinder helped. Work helped more. Neither answered when Elias spoke. The marriage advertisement had been written during a January storm, after the roof began leaking over the empty chair across from his table. He nearly burned the first 3 attempts. The fourth read, Wyoming Territory farrier, 36, sober and steadily employed, seeks a wife willing to share a plain home and an honest life. I bear visible injuries from a fire and will not misrepresent them. No woman will be asked to remain against her judgment. Return fare provided if either party declines the match. He mailed it to a matrimonial column in an Omaha newspaper before daylight, when no one was awake to see him cross the road. For 5 weeks, nothing came. Then Abigail Crane walked into the forge, carrying a cream envelope between 2 fingers. Your name is written on this too neatly to be a bill, she said. Elias stared at the envelope as if it might explode. Abigail placed it beside the anvil. Open it after you finish that hinge. Hot iron and courtship make poor partners. He waited until she left. Then he washed his hands twice, sat on an overturned keg, and broke the seal. Mr. Rourke, your notice was the first marriage advertisement I have read that offered a woman a way home. My name is Mara Bellamy. I am 32 years old and have spent 11 years keeping the accounts, pantry, and staff schedule of my father's hotel in Omaha. I am capable of hard work, though not all labor is best measured by how much a person can lift. I should tell you what others would mention before my character. I am a woman of generous size. This has caused strangers to assume I am lazy, foolish, or grateful for any attention. None of those assumptions are true. I do not require a handsome husband. I require an honest one. If your injuries have made you cruel, we would not suit. If they have made you understand what it is to be examined before you are known, perhaps we might. Respectfully, Mara Bellamy. Elias read the letter once. Then again, more slowly. He stopped at the line about the way home. It embarrassed him that she had noticed the one promise he had almost removed. He had worried it made him sound uncertain. Now he understood that uncertainty could also be a form of mercy. He wrote back that night, Miss Bellamy, I cannot claim my injuries improved my nature. Some days they have made me impatient, and I have used silence when plain speech would have been kinder. But I have never struck a woman, never taken wages from another's work, and never believed marriage gave a man ownership of his wife. My home is small. There are 2 rooms besides the kitchen, though one is used for storage. I can clear it before you arrive. The forge is loud from dawn until evening. The town is not always charitable. I do understand being seen before being known. If you come, the choice remains yours after we meet. Elias Rourke. Their correspondence lasted through the end of winter and into spring. Mara told him she preferred figures written in columns because numbers became less likely to lie when forced into order. She knew how to preserve apples, balance wages, calm an angry cook, and recognize when a supplier had changed the weight of a flour sack without changing the price. Elias told her which mountain flowers appeared first after snowmelt. He explained that horses often leaned toward people they trusted and bit those who pretended not to be afraid. He confessed that he could mend almost any machine in Ember Ridge except Abigail Crane's clock, which lost 7 minutes every Thursday for reasons no one could explain. He did not send a photograph. Neither did Mara. That absence became its own kind of honesty. In Omaha, Mara kept Elias's letters inside the locked cash drawer beneath the hotel ledger. The Bellamy house had once served governors and cattle buyers. By 1881, its carpets were worn pale along the center paths, and 2 upstairs rooms remained closed because her father could not afford to heat them. Henry Bellamy still dressed for supper in a black coat, polished shiny at the elbows. He spoke often of the hotel's reputation, and rarely of its debts. Mara knew every debt. She also knew which guests had not paid, which grocer had extended credit, and how much money her younger brother took from the register on Saturday nights. Her figures kept the doors open. Her name appeared on none of the accounts. The morning Elias's final letter arrived, she found her father in the office, examining the enclosed stagecoach ticket. "What is this?" he asked. Mara set down the basket of receipts she carried. "Mine." Henry looked from the ticket to her face. "You wrote to a stranger?" "I wrote to a farrier in Wyoming." Her brother Charles, lounging near the cold fireplace, gave a short laugh. "A horseman ordered himself a wife?" "He did not order me." Henry's expression hardened. "You cannot leave. The autumn bookings are beginning. I trained Mr. Wells to keep the front desk. He cannot manage the accounts." "No," Mara said. "He cannot." For the first time in years, she let the truth remain in the room without softening it. Her father pushed back from the desk. "You would abandon your family for a scarred laborer you have never seen." Mara looked at the unpaid invoices stacked beside his hand. Every figure on every page was in her writing. She thought of the wages she had never been given, and the proposals her father had once pursued for her. Not from men who wanted a wife, but from widowers who wanted free management for their shops. "I have given this family 11 years, and suppose this man sees you and changes his mind?" The question landed where he meant it to. Mara felt the old instinct to make herself smaller, to laugh first so no one could enjoy the wound. Instead, she placed both hands on the desk and met her brother's eyes. "Then I will use the return ticket he paid for and decide what comes next." Henry's face changed slightly at that, not because he understood her, but because another man had given her an option he never had. Mara packed one trunk. She took 3 dresses, 2 aprons, her mother's silver-backed brush, a sewing box, and the narrow ledger in which she had secretly recorded every dollar of unpaid wages owed to her. She left the larger gowns, the porcelain, and the heavy walnut furniture that had never belonged to her in any meaningful way. On the morning of departure, the hotel cook hugged her hard enough to crush the breath from her. "Make him deserve you," Mrs. Alvarez whispered. Mara climbed into the westbound coach before her courage could become a discussion. The journey took 9 days. She crossed miles of open prairie, where wind bent the grass in silver waves. She slept in crowded station houses, ate biscuits that tasted of dust, and learned to brace one boot against the coach wall when the wheels struck ruts. At Fort Laramie, a widow traveling with 2 children gave her a handful of late-blooming asters tied with thread. "For your wedding," the woman said. "There may not be one. Then keep them for yourself." By the final morning, the flowers had begun to wilt at the edges. Mara held them carefully anyway. The driver announced Ember Ridge just after midday. The town appeared between low red hills, gathered around a single broad street. Mara saw the church steeple first, then the freight sheds, then a line of false front buildings washed pale by dust. At the far end stood a forge, with its doors thrown open. People crowded both sides of the road. Too many people. Mara's stomach tightened. The driver glanced back through the opening. "Looks like they're expecting somebody." She did not answer. At the forge, Elias heard the bells on the lead team before the stagecoach cleared the eastern bend. His rasp stopped against the mare's shoe. Across the street, Wade Danner came down from the hotel porch, grinning as men reached for coins. Elias set the mare's hoof gently on the ground. His hands were black with iron dust. His good coat hung from a peg inside the forge, untouched because he had changed his mind 6 times about wearing it. Cinder rose beside him. The stagecoach rolled into view beneath a cloud of pale road dust, sunlight flashing across its windows. For one suspended moment, Elias could hear nothing, not Wade, not the wheels, not even the forge fire behind him. Only the hard, uneven beat of his own heart as the coach came toward Ember Ridge. The stagecoach stopped in front of the forge with a groan of leather and wood. Dust drifted past the windows. The driver climbed down and reached for the latch. Elias did not move until Abigail Crane crossed the road and stood beside him. "You might take off your apron," she said. He looked down at the scorched leather around his waist. "Or not," she wrote to a farrier, not a banker. The latch lifted. A boot appeared beneath the hem of a purple traveling dress. Then Mara Bellamy filled the doorway. She was broad through the hips and shoulders, with a soft, full face flushed from the journey. Brown curls had escaped beneath a blue bonnet. In both hands she held a fading bunch of asters, as carefully as if the town had gathered to admire them rather than her. The street went silent. Mara looked toward the forge and found Elias. Her gaze rose from his work boots to his black apron, then to the right side of his face. The skin there shone unevenly in the sun. His ear was a pale, twisted ridge, and the scar pulled at his mouth before disappearing beneath his collar. Her breath caught. A murmur stirred behind Wade Danner. Elias had expected that sound, but from Mara it struck somewhere beneath his ribs. He forced his shoulders to remain still. The driver set down a narrow step box. Mara looked at it, then at the distance to the ground. Before the man could offer his hand, Elias lifted the broad wooden platform he kept against the forge wall for older customers. He carried it into the street and braced it beneath the coach door. It was twice the width of the driver's step and reinforced with iron. Wade chuckled. "Built special, did you?" Elias ignored him. He looked up at Mara and removed his hat, leaving no shadow to soften what the fire had done. "My name is Elias Rourke," he said. "You need not step down if you've changed your mind." Mara studied the platform. "You made that? For anyone who needs firmer footing. Before you knew whether I would come?" "Yes." Something guarded in her face loosened. She handed the flowers to the driver, gathered her skirts, and placed one boot on the platform. Elias extended his left hand. Mara looked at the scarred knuckles, then placed her gloved hand in his. Her weight came down slowly. The platform did not tremble. Neither did his grip. When she reached the street, they stood close enough for her to see that his good eye was gray. "Mr. Rourke," she said. "Miss Bellamy." She glanced at the crowd. "Are they always this interested in arriving passengers?" "No. Then I shall try not to disappoint them too quickly." Abigail hid a laugh behind a cough. Wade's smile thinned. The driver lowered Mara's trunk. Elias lifted it, but Mara turned to the people lining the street. "I have traveled 9 days," she said. "Unless one of you has a hot bath hidden beneath your porch, I cannot imagine what you expect me to perform." Several faces turned away. Elias felt the corner of his mouth pull toward a smile. "My house is behind the forge," he said. Mara met his eyes. "Then you may show it to me." The cabin was cleaner than it had ever been, though Elias saw every flaw when she crossed the threshold. Fresh curtains hung unevenly over the windows. One bedroom held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a brass key in the lock. Mara noticed the key first. "That room is yours," Elias said. "The door locks from inside." "And where will you sleep?" "In the front room." She looked at the bench and folded blanket. "That will cripple you. I've slept in worse places. That does not recommend it. We have not agreed to marry. Until we do, this is proper." Mara removed her gloves. "You expected me to decide today?" "No. Everyone outside appears to. They are not part of the decision." Elias took a tin box from the cupboard. Inside lay folded bills, a coach schedule, and an eastbound ticket. "Your return fare," he said. "Abigail can hold the money if you prefer." Mara touched the edge of the ticket. "You truly meant it. I would not have written it otherwise." She faced him. "Have you told me everything about the fire?" "As much as I knew how to put in a letter." "Does the pain remain?" "In winter, and when I work too long." "Can you hear me?" From the left. She moved to that side. "Do you drink?" "Rarely." "Gamble?" "No." "Do you expect your wife to work without control of the money she earns?" His brow tightened. "No." "Do you expect children?" The question caught him. "I don't know whether I can give a woman children," he said. "I won't blame you if there are none." Mara lowered her eyes to the asters. "My body has been discussed as public property since I was 13. Some claim I could never bear a child. Others say childbearing is the only reason a man might endure marrying me. I cannot promise what I do not know. I didn't ask for a promise." "No." She looked up. "That is why I am still standing here." For a while, only the forge bellows could be heard through the wall. Cinder waited outside the open door. Mara called him in. The old dog sniffed her purple skirt and sat on her left foot. "That was quick," Elias said. "He may have better judgment than the town. He generally does." This time they both smiled. Elias showed her the pump, pantry, and stove. He told her which floorboard lifted and which corner of the roof leaked. Mara asked what coal cost, whether the well froze, and who held legal title to the property. When he produced the deed, she read every line. By sunset, Abigail arrived with supper and said Reverend Nathan Cole would be available the next afternoon, if required, and equally available not to be required. After they ate, Elias carried his blanket toward the forge. Mara stood in the cabin doorway. "You said the front room. The forge has a cot. Does it also have heat?" "More than enough." She understood. He was giving her the entire house for the night. Elias. It was the first time she used his given name. He stopped. "I have not decided," she said. "I know. But I am not afraid of you." His face turned partly away. "You gasped. The truth startled me. That is not the same as disgust." He looked at her then. Mara held his gaze, though the scars were fully visible in the lamplight. "I would rather marry a man whose face startled me once," she said, "than return to a house where no one has been startled by my unhappiness in 11 years. Elias stood very still. "You should sleep before deciding," he said at last. "Yes, I should." The next morning, Mara found him at the anvil before sunrise. He did not ask for her answer. He did not look toward the cabin until she entered wearing the purple dress, freshly brushed, with her mother's silver comb in her hair. Mara placed the return ticket on the anvil. Elias's hammer stopped above the glowing iron. "I won't need this today," she said, "but I would like Abigail to keep the fare in my name." His eyes moved from the ticket to her face. "And the wedding?" Reverend Cole said afternoon. He did. "I believe we should not keep a minister waiting." The hammer lowered. "Are you certain?" "No," Mara said. "I am choosing." Certainty might have been easier. Elias understood the greater gift in what she offered instead. At 3 o'clock, they stood beneath the cottonwood, behind Reverend Cole's church. Abigail served as witness. No crowd was invited. Before beginning, Reverend Cole asked Mara whether she had been pressured, threatened, or deprived of the means to leave. No. He asked Elias whether he understood that marriage did not erase the conditions under which she had agreed to remain. "I understand." They spoke their vows without flourish. When Elias placed the plain iron ring on Mara's finger, his injured hand stiffened. She steadied it between both of hers until the ring slid home. He did not kiss her until Reverend Cole gave permission, and Mara lifted her chin. Even then, he touched his mouth only briefly to her forehead. That evening they returned to the cabin as husband and wife, though neither pretended the title had made them less strange to one another. Mara kept the bedroom key. Her return money remained with Abigail. Elias slept on a proper cot in the front room. Before closing her door, Mara found him adjusting the blanket with one stiff hand. "We are married," she said, "but we are not required to become familiar faster than trust allows." "No, and neither of us will mistake silence for agreement." He looked up at her. "That may be harder for me. Then we will practice." Mara closed the door, but did not turn the key. On the other side, Elias lay awake, listening to the quiet movements of another human being beneath his roof. For the first time in years, the sound did not make the cabin feel smaller. It made it feel inhabited. In the first week of their marriage, Mara learned that Elias rose before the sun, spoke to horses more easily than people, and left every unpaid invoice in the same wooden box beneath his workbench. She found the box while looking for lamp oil. There were receipts folded into quarters, bridge notes written on feed sacks, and work orders stamped with the red seal of Vale Freight Company. Some had been paid in part, others not at all. Mara carried the box into the forge. Elias was shaping a wagon pin. She waited until he returned the iron to the coals. "Do you keep another ledger?" He glanced at the box. That is the ledger. That is a burial ground. It tells me who owes what. Half these papers have no dates. I remember the jobs. Will you remember them in 5 years? His jaw tightened. Most likely. That is not the same as being paid. Elias turned toward the fire. Vale keeps half the town working. Men wait on his wagons for flour and medicine. And because he is useful, he may cheat you? I didn't say that. You did not need to. Mara heard the sharpness in her voice and stopped. Elias's shoulders had gone rigid, not with anger, but with the expectation of being judged incapable. She set the box down gently. I am not saying you failed, she said. I am asking whether you will let me make this easier. He looked at her from his unscarred side. What would you need? A proper ledger, every order, delivery, and payment, and a table where I can work without balancing paper on my knees. By the end of the week, Elias had built her a wide oak desk beside the forge window. He reinforced the legs and sanded every edge smooth enough that her sleeves would not catch. Mara ran her hand over the polished wood. No one has ever built anything because I needed it. Elias lowered his eyes, as though gratitude embarrassed him more than insult ever had. At the desk, disorder became columns. Mara learned that Elias charged Vale Freight less for an axle brace than other smiths charged for 4 horseshoes. He had repaired 6 freight wheels, replaced 2 bridge straps, and forged 12 locking pins for the Blackwater crossing. Vale's company owed him $43.60. When she showed him, he stared at the page. That cannot be right. It is exact. He paid something last month. $8. You remembered 20 because Wade said the rest would come later. Elias rubbed the scarred side of his neck. Wade brings most of the orders. Then Wade can bring the money. The church supper came 3 days later. Mara would have preferred to remain home, but Reverend Cole had invited them, and she refused to begin her marriage by hiding whenever Ember Ridge gathered in one room. She wore her brown dress. Elias wore his good coat, fastened high at the collar. The church hall smelled of coffee, baked squash, and damp wool. Conversations faltered when they entered, then resumed too loudly. Abigail waved them toward her table. For half an hour, nothing happened. Mara answered questions about Omaha. Elias repaired a loose handle on the serving urn. The ordinary nature of it almost eased the knot between Mara's shoulders. Then Wade Danner carried his plate past them. He looked at Mara's chair, then at the bench beside her. Cole ought to charge by the width of the seat, he said. A few people laughed before deciding they had not. Mara set down her fork. Wade turned toward Elias. Though I suppose Rourke is accustomed to building special supports now. Elias began to rise. Mara touched 2 fingers to his sleeve, not to stop him from defending her, but to ask for room to defend herself first. Mr. Danner, she said, since you are interested in what things cost, perhaps you can answer a question. His grin lingered. Go on. Why has Vale Freight paid $8 toward $43.60 in completed work? The room quieted. That is company business. You made it public business when you discussed the cost of my chair. Mara opened the account book in her reticule. 6 wheel rims, 2 axle braces, 12 bridge pins, 1 emergency hub repair, all accepted by your signature. Wade looked toward the door. Rourke never complained. No, you mistook his patience for permission. He stepped closer. You think a ring makes you a businesswoman? No. 11 years of keeping a hotel alive did that. Elias stood. He did not move in front of Mara. He took the place beside her. Wade looked up at him. Control your wife. She is not mine to control, Elias said. The hall went still. She keeps the accounts now. Her figures are my figures. Until Vale Freight pays every dollar owed, I will shoe no company team, repair no wagon, and forge no iron under your seal. You cannot shut us out. I just did. Wade searched the room for support. Calvin Vale was absent. Sheriff Keller watched from the rear wall without moving. You are making a mistake, Wade said. Then pay the bill and let the mistake be mine. Wade's gaze returned to Mara. His apology came through clenched teeth. "I spoke poorly, Mrs. Rourke. I apologize." Mara closed the account book. "Payment is due Monday." Wade left without finishing his supper. The room did not erupt in approval. Some faces remained guarded. Others looked ashamed of their earlier laughter. But when Mara and Elias rose, no one blocked their path. Outside, frost silvered the grass. They walked toward the forge, side by side. After half a block, Elias said, "I was going to hit him." "I know. You stopped me. I asked you to wait. You did not need me." Mara stopped beneath a bare cottonwood. "I did. I needed you to believe me before the room did. You stood beside me. That was the part I could not do alone." The tension in his face eased. "And for the record," she added, "I was glad you looked as though hitting him remained an available option." A rough laugh escaped him. It was the first time Mara had heard the sound without caution in it. At the forge door, Elias offered his arm, not because the ground was uneven and not because anyone was watching. Mara took it because she wanted to. Inside, her ledger waited open on the desk he had built. For the first time, Elias did not see it as proof of what he had failed to manage. He saw it as proof that he no longer had to manage everything alone. The following morning, Wade's payment arrived in a sealed envelope. The money was exact. The paperwork was not. Mara spread the receipts across her desk and found 3 work orders bearing Elias's name for repairs he had never performed. One listed 20 bridge pins delivered during a week when he had been sick in bed. Another charged the Territorial Maintenance Fund for new iron straps, though the straps on Blackwater Bridge were still the ones Elias had fitted 2 years earlier. She carried the papers to the anvil. "These signatures are copied," she said. Elias studied them, and the iron was never ordered. Then someone collected payment for work that did not exist. His gaze settled on the red veil seal. That evening, while snow clouds gathered over the western ridge, Mara repaired the collar of Elias's good coat. He watched her leave the scarred side lower instead of raising it to hide his neck. "You missed a button," he said. "No, I removed it." "Why?" "Because you keep dressing as though you owe strangers an apology." He looked away. "And you keep speaking as though you have never wished I looked different." Mara set down the needle. "I have wished many things," she said. "I wished the fire had never hurt you. I wished my family had loved me, without first measuring what I could do for them. But I have never wished you were another man." Elias opened his hand. On his palm lay a small brooch shaped like an aster, each iron petal hammered thin and darkly polished. "I made it from the first bridge pin you rejected," he said. "The one with the flaw." Mara pinned it above her heart. Then she crossed the space between them and touched the unscarred corner of his mouth. "May I?" His answer was barely audible. "Yes." Their first kiss was careful only for a moment. By morning, the forged papers were hidden beneath a loose floorboard, and Mara had copied every number into her private ledger. Calvin Vale came before noon. He entered the forge in a fur-lined coat, carrying the polished calm of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "My company paid its debt," he said. "The matter is closed." Mara remained at her desk. "Not while territorial funds are being charged for iron that was never made." Vale's eyes cooled. "Those records belong to my company." "They bear my husband's name." Elias stepped beside her. Vale looked at his scars without disguising his contempt. "You survived because I gave you work when no one else would." "I survived the fire before you gave me anything," Elias said. For the first time, he spoke aloud the suspicion he had carried for years. Vale's cheap pitch, thin roof braces, and missing safety barrels had turned the rail shed into a trap. Vale's expression did not change, but his silence confirmed enough. "You have until tomorrow to surrender those papers," he said. "After that, whatever happens to your business is your own doing." Sheriff Keller listened to Mara that afternoon, examined the copies, and rubbed a hand over his jaw. "It suggests fraud," he said. "It does not prove Vale ordered it." "Then watch the bridge," Mara replied. "That is where the false charges lead." Keller promised a patrol. The storm arrived before the patrol did. At dusk, bells rang wildly from the eastern road. Abigail burst into the forge, snow whitening her shoulders. The westbound coach is on Blackwater Bridge. The center span dropped. Elias seized his tools. Mara took the maintenance ledger and followed. Wind tore across the gorge. The coach leaned over the broken rail, one wheel hanging above darkness. Passengers screamed inside while the driver fought the terrified team. Elias crawled beneath the span and found the missing brace. It wasn't broken, he shouted. It was cut. A timber shifted. The deck slammed downward, pinning his leg beneath a crossbeam. Mara heard his cry and felt fear rise like ice through her chest. She did not let it choose for her. "Unhitch the rear team," she ordered. "Run both traces through the cargo pulley. Abigail, keep the passengers moving one at a time to the east end. Sheriff, tie the coach axle to the cottonwood." Men who might once have ignored her moved because she gave them no time to doubt. Mara opened the ledger against the snow. Elias's measurements were written in the margin. Center brace, 7/8 pin, 14 inches. "The spare rack," she called. "Third bin from the left. Bring the long pin." A boy from the freight shed returned with it. Mara fixed the pulley line around the fallen beam and took the lead rope with 2 other townsmen. "Steady," she said. "Do not jerk it. Lift on my count." The horses leaned into the traces. The beam rose an inch. Elias dragged his leg free. Mara reached him before he could stand. "Can you finish it?" "With help. You have it." Together they crawled beneath the shaking deck. Mara held the lantern and fed him the replacement pin while Elias aligned the brace. His injured hand failed once. She closed both hands around his wrist until the tremor passed. The pin drove home. Above them, the bridge settled. The last child crossed to safety, just as Sheriff Keller's deputy galloped from town with news. Wade Danner had been caught inside the forge, trying to burn the account books. Abigail had seen him enter, and Keller had found a written order in his coat, instructing him to remove the center brace and destroy Elias's records afterward. By dawn, Calvin Vale was under arrest. Spring came late to Ember Ridge. The territorial court seized Vale Freight's local contracts and restored the stolen maintenance money. Elias received the bridge work through an open bid, with every price entered by Mara and posted where the town could see it. Their forge became a larger repair shop, not because every neighbor suddenly grew kind, but because skill and honest records proved harder to dismiss than gossip. Mara's desk stood at the front window. Elias no longer slept in the outer room. One bright April afternoon, a stagecoach rolled into town. New passengers leaned from its windows, studying the burned farrier at the forge. By habit, Elias reached for his hat. Mara came outside wearing the iron aster. She placed a fresh bunch of wildflowers in his hand. He remembered a purple dress, a widened step, and a woman who had accepted his hand while an entire street waited for her to refuse it. This time, he left his hat where it hung. "You never had to hide from me," Mara said. Elias looked toward the crowded street, then back at his wife. "No," he answered, "but you taught me I didn't have to hide from them either."